I want you to picture your morning today and try to be as honest as possible with yourself here. Did your eyes snap open to a blaring alarm followed almost instantly by just a barrage of notifications?
Ah, the dread of the morning screen.
Right, a glowing screen essentially dictating your mood before your feet even touch the floor. Because if you're anything like me, and so many of us trying to make an impact in this fast-paced world, your mind is probably racing through a dozen micro tasks before the sun has even crested the horizon.
Yeah, you're already behind before you've begun.
Exactly. You gulp your coffee, you scan the emails, make these rapid-fire decisions, and just dive headfirst into the friction of the day. And we have this collective habit of labeling this frantic, exhausting sprint as productivity.
Right, we really do.
But despite all that relentless output, why do we still end up feeling so fragmented? Like we're running a million miles an hour, but somehow not arriving anywhere meaningful. I mean, we want success, we crave knowledge and growth, but the friction of the modern world leaves us feeling hopelessly scattered.
It's arguably the defining struggle of our age. We've been heavily conditioned to view time purely as a container for action.
The container.
There's a rigid box that we have to cram as much output, as many tasks and accomplishments into as humanly possible. But what if we shifted that paradigm? What if we viewed time not as a container for doing, but as a vessel for awareness?
A vessel for awareness, I love that.
And that is really the heart of our mission in this deep dive today. We're going to explore a profoundly quiet yet revolutionary concept. The power of doing a specific thing at a consistent time every single day. Not as some rigid productivity hack to squeeze more blood from the stone, but as a systematic way to return to yourself.
Okay, that is a tall order for someone whose default mode is, frankly, restless ambition. My instinct is always to look for the next optimization, the next gear to shift into. But I see the limits of that approach every single day.
We all hit that wall eventually.
We do. So we're going to connect the hard biological realities of decision fatigue with the unhurried rhythms of ancient monastic life. Because what we're uncovering here is how the ambition that drives us and the inner peace that grounds us, they aren't actually at odds. True success and inner peace might just be two sides of a singular coin.
To really grasp the mechanics of this, I want to take you far away from the glowing screens and the morning rush. I want you to imagine a monastery, high up and nestled in the misty, quiet hills of Bhutan.
Sounds amazing already.
Right. Long before the first light touches the earth, a single bell rings. It's soft, clear, and deeply resonant. But here's the critical difference from your smartphone alarm. It is not a demand for urgency. It's an invitation to presence.
Not a demand, an invitation.
Exactly. A monk rises from his bed, and he doesn't get up because he feels obligated or because he's late for a strategy meeting. He rises because his body intimately knows the hour. He walks barefoot across the cold stone courtyard. He takes a broom and sweeps with these incredibly slow, deliberate strokes. He sits in silence as the world slowly stirs awake. Every movement he makes is unhurried. And yet, nothing is delayed. There is zero rush, but everything is accomplished.
See, I hear a story like that, and part of me just yearns for that simplicity. But my modern brain immediately starts trying to dissect why that feels so grounding. And it really comes down to neurobiology.
It always does, doesn't it?
It does. We completely forget that we are cyclical creatures. We're not machines with an on and off switch, yet we treat ourselves like servers that should just run at maximum capacity 24/7.
Yeah. Always online, always processing.
Always processing. But our cortisol naturally peaks in the early morning to wake us up, our melatonin rises at night to put us to sleep, and our attention spans wax and wane in these predictable ultradian rhythms throughout the entire day. When we fight that, when we try to force, say, complex strategic output at midnight, we completely fragment our cognitive resources.
You're hitting on a fundamental truth of human design there. In yogic philosophy, there's a specific breathing technique and a broader concept called samavriti.
Samavriti, yes.
It translates roughly to equal mental fluctuation, or balanced flow. When you practice samavriti breathing, your inhales and exhales are perfectly matched in length, and that creates this deep sense of equilibrium in the nervous system. We can apply that exact concept to how we structure our days.
Oh, I see where you're going with this.
Our daily lives can find that natural cadence when we anchor them in intentional repetition. Think of a lotus flower. Every evening, as the light fades, it closes. Every dawn, it opens. It doesn't agonize over the decision.
It just does it.
Exactly. It doesn't resist the nightfall or desperately cling to the daylight. It simply trusts the rhythm of the sun and responds with total grace.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because that agonizing over the decision you just mentioned, that is the invisible drain on our energy. Modern life depletes our mental reserves through a relentless stream of micro decisions. We wake up and immediately have to decide, like, what do I wear? Should I check my email before or after I shower?
Do I have time for the gym?
Right. Do I have time for the gym? We suffer from massive decision fatigue. Every single choice, no matter how trivial, consumes a tiny bit of glucose in the prefrontal cortex. By the time we actually sit down to do the meaningful work, to build the business or write the book, our willpower and creativity are already compromised.
The tank is empty.
Exactly. We spend all our energy deciding what to do, leaving a depleted tank for the actual doing.
Which is precisely where the biological and psychological magic of fixed time habits comes in. When you do a specific action at a consistent time every day, that action moves out of the realm of choice and crosses over into the realm of being.
The realm of being.
Yes. You don't wake up and expend precious cognitive energy debating whether to meditate at 6 in the morning. You simply are meditating at 6. The boundary between you and the action begins to dissolve. And in that shift, when the friction of choice is removed, an unbelievable amount of cognitive freedom is born.
I see this pattern constantly when looking at elite performers across different disciplines. The Olympic athlete, right? The swimmer isn't lying in bed at 4 in the morning taking a poll of their emotional state before deciding to go to the pool.
No, the decision was made months ago.
Exactly. Or the prolific novelist who consistently writes 500 words before breakfast. Or the CEO who sits in 10 minutes of silence before looking at their phone. Their output isn't just a product of raw, untamed talent. It's the discipline of showing up. It's a dedication to a routine that acts as a guardrail against their own fluctuating motivation.
And this pragmatic approach, it actually borders on the profound. In Zen monasteries, there's a practice called oryoki. It's a highly ritualized meal eaten in total silence. The monks use precise movements that are repeated identically day after day.
Identical movement.
Down to the millimeter. The hand lifts the bowl at a specific angle, at a specific moment. The cloth is folded just so. And they don't do this to suppress their individuality or become robots. They do it to soften the boundary between the doer and the deed.
That's beautiful.
When you remove the endless friction of preference and choice, the action itself becomes a meditation. Eating a bowl of rice becomes an anchor to the present moment.
I want to bridge this into how we view our attention, because we live in an economy that actively mines our distraction. We glorify novelty. We're always hunting for the new app, the new productivity system, the new life hack that promises to give us our time back.
The silver bullet.
The silver bullet, yeah. We chase these quick dopamine spikes from clearing an inbox, but we completely neglect the slow, sustained burn of deep meaning.
To understand why that novelty chase is so exhausting, we really have to reframe what attention actually is. Attention is not a currency we spend. It's soil that we cultivate.
Soil that we cultivate.
Picture a centuries-old tea house in Kyoto. The host prepares the tea, and every single gesture, the folding of the napkin, the pouring of the hot water, the whisking of the matcha, it's all performed with exacting precision. The host doesn't rush, nor do they delay. They move in harmony with an invisible, deeply ingrained rhythm.
So it's very deliberate.
Highly deliberate. To the untrained modern eye, it just looks like a rigid, perhaps overly complicated ritual. But it's actually a living demonstration of sati, the Pali word for mindfulness, woven directly into ordinary action.
And when you practice that level of mindfulness consistently, it compounds, doesn't it? It builds into something much more powerful than just being aware of your surroundings.
Yes. Think of sati, or mindfulness, as the act of gathering scattered beams of light. In our normal day, our attention is refracted in 100 different directions. A text message here, the news alert there. But when you do an action repeatedly without rushing, you align those beams. Over time, they focus into a single, intense laser point.
And what happens then?
That laser focus is what's known as samadhi. It's a deep, unshakable concentration that isn't forced through sheer willpower, but is born organically from continuity and rhythm.
That highlights the ultimate paradox of our current era. I mean, you and I, we have more calendar apps, scheduling software, and time management frameworks than any generation in human history. We can optimize our days down to the minute.
We can try at least.
We can try. Yet as a culture, we feel more scattered and overwhelmed than ever because we confuse busyness with engagement. We fill every tiny gap in our day with input scrolling while in line for coffee, answering messages while walking the dog. We leave zero space for our brains to actually integrate the information we're taking in. We just constantly fight the natural flow of our own energy, and it causes so much inner friction.
I can give you a perfect real-world example example of what that friction looks like and how to resolve it. Consider a highly ambitious startup founder. She's drowning in investor calls, instant messages, and looming launch deadlines.
A very familiar scenario for a lot of people listening.
Absolutely. She tries to survive by optimizing everything, answering emails while eating a salad at her desk, strategizing while on a treadmill. But her decisions become entirely reactive. Her sleep degrades because her nervous system is locked in a sympathetic fight-or-flight state.
Cortisol through the roof.
Exactly. Her relationships start to fray. So she makes one seemingly tiny counterintuitive shift. Every morning, at exactly 6:30, before the rest of the world wakes up, she sits in her living room in absolute silence for 20 minutes.
Wow.
No phone, no agenda, just her breath.
Knowing the startup founders I've talked to, I can imagine her ambitious brain absolutely screaming that this is an unforgivable waste of productive time. I mean, 20 minutes could be used to clear out 30 emails.
Initially, her brain does rebel, it screams. But then, neurobiology kicks in. We know from neuroscience that regular mindfulness practice physically alters the brain. It thickens the prefrontal cortex, the area responsible for executive function, emotional regulation, and long-term planning, while simultaneously shrinking the amygdala, the fear and stress center.
So she's physically rewiring herself.
Yes. But the real secret here is the timing. Because she does it at the exact same hour every day, her brain begins to anticipate that time not as another task to check off, but as a homecoming. The neural pathways stabilize. Instead of her nervous system bracing for impact every morning, it learns to drop into a state of profound calm. She begins to respond to the chaos of her day with clarity, rather than just frantically reacting to the loudest fire alarm.
Here's where it gets really interesting to me. Let's bring this down to the ground level because the practical applications for someone listening who wants to build a successful life are massive. Think about how people handle their finances. People often chase wealth with chaotic, sporadic bursts of energy, a sudden urge to check the stock market, a panic about a credit card bill.
Which just breeds anxiety.
It breeds massive anxiety. But the people who build lasting abundance do it through rhythm. Sitting down to review a budget every Sunday evening or automating investments on the first of the month, it shifts the act from a source of anxiety to a grounded routine. It's not austerity anymore.
That shift from anxiety to intention is profound. In Buddhist philosophy, there are concepts known as dana, which is generosity, and sila, which is ethical conduct. When you apply a steady rhythm to your finances, you're essentially practicing dana and sila with your own resources.
Wow, applying ancient concepts to budgeting.
You are treating your future self and the people who depend on you with generosity and integrity. It's no longer a chore, it's an act of care.
What about relationships? I'll be honest, I struggle with this one. Scheduling a call to a parent or a friend for, say, 7 o'clock every Tuesday feels almost sterile to me. Like I'm treating my mother as a calendar invite to be managed.
It's a common hesitation, but look at the alternative. How often do we say, I really need to call my mother? And then that thought just hangs over you as low-grade guilt as it dissolves into the busyness of the week.
Guilt is a good word for it, yeah.
When you schedule that call for 7 o'clock on Tuesday, you aren't doing it to be rigidly efficient. You're doing it to make that time sacred. At 6:59, you are free to focus on your work without guilt. And at 7 o'clock, you are fully, completely present with her. It shifts the dynamic from a lingering afterthought to a dedicated ritual of care. It's meta-loving kindness put into direct, consistent action.
I see how that works. The consistency creates a container for genuine connection. And I imagine this concept is incredibly potent when dealing with failure and adversity. Imagine an artist who has spent a year preparing for a massive gallery exhibition, and at the last minute, the funding falls through and it gets canceled.
Devastating.
Completely. And the modern instinct is to spiral, to step away, lick your wounds, and wait until you feel inspired again to create. But an artist who has cultivated a rhythm still walks into her studio at 9 the next morning. She doesn't have to rely on the fickle feeling of inspiration or motivation. She relies on the resilience of her routine to carry her through the disappointment.
This raises a fascinating point about the nature of control. Doing the same thing at a specific time feels, on the surface, like a mechanism of extreme control. But it's actually the ultimate act of surrender.
Surrender, how so?
By releasing the need to constantly decide whether to act, you free up an immense, almost unbelievable amount of energy for how to act. Think back to the monk in Bhutan. The monk doesn't debate ringing the morning bell. The decision to ring it was made years ago. Now he just rings it with his full heart. By unchoosing the when and the what, we actually escape the exhausting tyranny of our own egos.
It's a beautiful philosophy, but my modern brain immediately pushes back. If I spend 2 hours a day in a state of surrendered, unhurried flow, ignoring my emails and Slack messages, my business might actually fail. How do we reconcile that monk-like patience with the real-world demands of looming deadlines and aggressive goals?
It is the essential question. To illustrate the unseen architecture of how this functions in the real world, consider a profound story from the Tibetan tradition. A master carver spent 40 entire years carving a single wooden statue of Chenrezig, the Bodhisattva of compassion.
40 years on one statue.
One statue. Every single morning, without fail, he sat at his workbench at sunrise and carved for exactly 2 hours. He never rushed. He never used modern tools to speed up the process. When a visitor finally asked him why he didn't work faster to complete the commission, the master smiled and said, "The statue was already whole. I am only removing what is not needed."
That is incredible.
When he finally finished, the statue is said to have radiated such immense peace that people wept just standing in front of it.
The statue was already whole. I am only removing what is not needed. That is a remarkable perspective, because it completely flips the definition of achievement on its head. True success isn't about what you produce or the sheer volume of your output. It's about who you become in the process of creating it. The outer world, your achievements, your wealth, your status, it's all merely a reflection of your inner landscape.
Precisely. And this is how we address your pushback about the business failing. We have this false dichotomy in the modern world that spirituality and ambition are opposites, that you either retreat to a cave to meditate or you hustle in the boardroom to build an empire.
Right, they seem mutually exclusive.
But true mindfulness isn't the opposite of success. It's the very foundation of sustainable high performance. The entrepreneur who takes 20 minutes to meditate before a high-stakes investor pitch isn't just doing some trendy stress management technique to feel good. She is actively aligning her raw ambition with her deepest integrity. She is sharpening the blade so the cuts she makes the rest of the day are clean and precise.
When you look back at history, you realize the hidden rituals of the greats all reflect this exact dynamic. They didn't use these routines to hide from the world. They used them to dominate their respective fields with clear minds. Steve Jobs famously sat in morning silence to cultivate his intuition before going into intensely demanding product meetings. Maya Angelou would rent a completely bare, anonymous hotel room and arrive at dawn just to write. She removed all choices, all distractions, so the only thing left was the work. Marcus Aurelius was running the Roman Empire, yet he sat down to write his meditations in his journal before the sun came up.
A powerful lineage of rhythm.
Absolutely. They all intuitively understood a fundamental truth. You cannot create from emptiness. You have to fill your own vessel first in that quiet, dedicated hour before you can pour anything of value into your work.
And here is the ultimate paradigm shift for you listening right now. We tend to view these daily rituals, the meditation, the journaling, the morning run, the budgeting on Sunday, as tools. We think they are stepping stones to get us to some future state of success where we will finally feel accomplished and at peace. But what if the daily ritual isn't a tool for success? What if it is the essence of success itself?
I want to make sure I fully grasp that. Are you saying the action itself is the finish line?
I am. The specific moment you sit in stillness at 6 in the morning, that is the achievement. The deep breath you remember to take before sending an angry, reactive email to a colleague, that is the victory. In a culture that only measures success by accumulation and milestones, this is a radically different way to live. The repetition of your daily practice isn't a boring chore you have to get through to be successful. It's deeply devotional. Every time you return to your practice, you're experiencing a homecoming to your true self. The journey and the destination become one.
That brings up some incredibly heavy-hitting questions for you listening right now. The ambitious learner, the person trying to optimize their day, build a career, and make a dent in the universe. Are you spending your days merely building companies, or are you actively building character? Are you frantically chasing external goals, or are you using your time and your routines to grow your soul? It forces you to look at your calendar not as a list of demands, but as a reflection of your values.
Those questions are the mirror, because ultimately time is not a resource to be mined and extracted for maximum financial or productive value. It is a mirror reflecting what you truly prioritize. Success is not a shiny trophy waiting at the end of a decades-long grind where you finally grant yourself permission to rest. It's a frequency, and you tune that frequency through the quiet, often unspectacular fidelity of showing up consistently day after day.
We started this deep dive talking about the intense friction of the modern morning, the notifications, the racing mind, the exhaustion of decision fatigue. And we've journeyed through the neurobiology of focus all the way to a Tibetan master carving a statue at dawn. The core takeaway here is that your rhythm is your sanctuary. In a world of endless variables, it's the one thing you actually have agency over.
In a society that never stops, a culture that constantly demands your attention, your outrage, and your output, the most radical act you can commit is simply to return. To return to yourself, to return to your rhythm, and to return to the quiet truth that you are already whole. To borrow from the story of the carver, maybe the statue was never wood, maybe it was always you.
That is a profound place to land. And I want to leave you with one final, slightly provocative thought to mull over as you step back into the momentum of your day. Consider how the changing of the seasons perfectly mirrors this concept of returning and trusting a rhythm. Winter never apologizes for resting. It strips the trees bare and slumbers, and spring never rushes its bloom. It arrives exactly when it's meant to, with immense power. What if you viewed your own daily rituals not as a rigid, punishing human schedule that you have to aggressively enforce upon yourself, but rather as your own personal microseasons? A biological force of nature that you don't actually have to manage or optimize, but simply surrender to. Let that dictate your rhythm today. Until next time, keep exploring.